From the Dinar Daily, here's your trusted source for intelligence grounded in verified data, not speculation or hype. In today's report, we take a careful look at major developments reverberating through the global currency markets. These aren't just background noise. They're potentially pivotal in shaping economic decisions around the world. What sets this update apart is a firm emphasis on fact-based reporting rather than rumor mills or unfounded predictions. Too many voices have leaned on anecdotes, social media chatter, or unverified blog posts that thrive on attention but collapse under scrutiny. We're cutting through that by analyzing changes that were not only reported on national television, but also formally confirmed by senior officials, central bankers, and credible institutions. These are developments already influencing how trade agreements are written, how governments shape fiscal policies, and how private investors adjust their strategies. If you hold the Iraqi dinar, IQD, or Vietnamese dong, VND, or are considering entering these markets, this verified intelligence is a direct framework for understanding where things may be heading and what opportunities or risks could emerge. We focus on measurable indicators, official announcements, and documented policy shifts to ensure you receive analysis that empowers rational planning instead of feeding wishful thinking or fear-driven speculation. For years, the Iraqi dinar has been a subject of speculation, sometimes bordering on mythology. Many investors, both domestic and international, were drawn to bold predictions about massive overnight reevaluations or instant windfalls. While these stories captured the imagination, they often rested on shaky foundations with little connection to verified data or economic reality. Iraq's story today, however, is moving beyond that cloud of uncertainty towards something far more tangible. This shift isn't about rumors whispered in online forums, but about structured reforms backed by the Central Bank of Iraq and echoed by respected economic authorities. Iraq, a nation with vast oil wealth yet scarred by decades of conflict and instability, is beginning to redirect its energy toward a program of modernization designed to bring stability, transparency, and trust to its financial system. One of the most significant reforms is the digitization of the banking sector. For decades, more than 90% of the Iraqi money supply existed outside of the formal banking system, a reality that fueled corruption, tax evasion, and black market exchanges. By digitizing transactions, authorities aren't just creating greater efficiency. They're also closing loopholes that allow illicit flows of capital to thrive. Added to this are public awareness campaigns urging citizens to deposit hidden cash into banks, which in turn strengthens liquidity and allows the government to exercise stronger fiscal management. The results are not theoretical. Official data already confirms the dinar has begun to gain ground against the US dollar. For the average Iraqi, this means higher purchasing power, lower import costs, and a visible boost in consumer confidence. While it's premature to declare a full-scale revaluation, the currency's steady appreciation signals a deliberate and data-backed realignment that is far more credible than speculative promises of the past. Beyond domestic reforms, Iraq's engagement with international financial institutions like the IMF and the World Bank demonstrates its commitment to aligning with globally accepted practices and standards. For years, Iraq struggled with the perception of being opaque, unpredictable, and too reliant on its oil exports to sustain fiscal stability. The reforms currently underway suggest a conscious decision to change that narrative by modernizing its financial architecture and promoting a culture of transparency. Iraq is signaling to foreign investors, trading partners, and regional allies that it is serious about building credibility. Collaborations with organizations such as the IMF bring not only technical expertise but also validation, as these institutions enforce rigorous reporting standards and provide structured oversight for investors. This creates a new dimension of confidence, as Iraq is not operating in isolation but is supported by globally recognized financial frameworks. On a domestic level, reducing cash dependency and encouraging electronic transactions means ordinary Iraqis will have easier access to services like credit, loans, and digital banking tools, which in turn stimulate entrepreneurship and internal Growth. From a macroeconomic perspective, Iraq's diversification into stronger fiscal control mechanisms makes it less vulnerable to sudden oil price swings and helps lay a foundation for sustainable long-term development. While challenges remain, including political instability, regional security concerns, and the pace of public adoption, these reforms mark a meaningful transition from speculative chatter to substantive, verifiable progress. If applied equitably and consistently, they could reshape not only Iraq's financial system but also the broader trajectory of its national economy for decades to come. Vietnam's story is different from Iraq's, but no less important for global investors and policymakers. In recent weeks, the Vietnamese dong VND has experienced mild depreciation against both the US dollar and the euro. For many casual observers, any decline in a currency's value immediately sparks alarm, prompting narratives of weakness or instability. However, when viewed through the lens of broader macroeconomic trends, Vietnam's situation reveals itself to be more nuanced. The depreciation is not a symptom of internal collapse, but rather the outcome of global factors that have affected nearly all emerging markets. Rising global inflation, higher import costs, and lingering disruptions across supply chains, particularly in the wake of shifting trade patterns with China and Western economies, have all played a part in temporarily pressuring the dong. For Vietnam, this has required a policy of strategic flexibility rather than rigid defense. By allowing controlled depreciation, the government cushions domestic industries reliant on exports, ensuring they remain competitive on the international stage despite stronger foreign currencies. At the same time, Vietnam's central bank has acted to prevent runaway inflation by intervening when necessary to maintain confidence in the currency. Unlike economies that experience sudden, uncontrolled collapses, Vietnam's movements have been measured, deliberate, and closely tied to global market realities. This approach provides reassurance that while challenges exist, the underlying fundamentals remain resilient. With strong manufacturing capacity, a growing middle class, and diversified trade partnerships, Vietnam continues to position itself as a stable and attractive emerging market. For investors, the short-term fluctuations in the dong should be understood not as a red flag but as part of a strategic balancing act, designed to maintain long-term economic growth while navigating external pressures. Vietnam's fundamentals remain strong despite the short-term depreciation of the dong against major currencies like the US dollar and euro. In fact, the current environment highlights why the country has become one of the most reliable growth stories among emerging markets. Over the past decade, Vietnam has consistently attracted foreign direct investment, FDI. Much of this is driven by global companies looking for alternatives to China in the wake of rising labor costs, geopolitical frictions, and shifting supply chains. Electronics manufacturing, textiles, and agricultural exports remain highly competitive, with Vietnamese firms integrating into global networks that supply everything from smartphones to footwear. In addition, the country has built industrial parks, logistics hubs, and supporting infrastructure to enhance its role as a key regional manufacturing base. Beyond traditional sectors, steady progress in technology, e-commerce, and industrial production is creating a more diversified economy. This positions Vietnam not just as a low-cost alternative but as a rising middle-income nation capable of climbing the value chain. Importantly, a slightly weaker dong can actually reinforce these strengths. A modest depreciation makes Vietnamese goods more affordable abroad, providing a competitive edge in global markets and encouraging even greater FDI inflows. The jobs created by this expansion fuel domestic consumption, strengthening internal demand while reinforcing external credibility. For investors, today's softer exchange rate should be viewed less as a warning sign and more as an opportunity to position early in an economy where long-term fundamentals remain compelling, stable, and resilient in the face of global volatility. Currency movements are often portrayed as technical shifts reserved for economists, traders, or policymakers. But the reality is, they ripple into everyday life in ways most people don't always recognize. For families dependent on remittances, A stronger home currency means that every dollar, euro, or pound sent from abroad buys fewer goods and services locally, while a weaker one stretches the value of those transfers further. For students studying overseas, tuition payments, housing, and daily expenses are directly tied to exchange rate fluctuations, which can transform affordable programs into financial burdens or, conversely, create unexpected savings. Travelers experience this directly when planning holidays or business trips. As local purchasing power changes with each exchange rate swing, businesses, especially importers and exporters, must constantly adjust their strategies. A stronger currency benefits importers by lowering the cost of foreign goods but can hurt exporters by making their products more expensive abroad. The reverse is true when the currency weakens. These trade-offs cascade into broader national policies. For Iraq, a stronger dinar reduces inflationary pressures and lowers the cost of basic goods like food and medicine, directly improving living standards. For Vietnam, a weaker dong enhances the competitiveness of exports, boosting employment and stimulating growth. What emerges is a reminder that currency dynamics are not distant abstractions. They shape the financial realities of households, the competitiveness of businesses, and the stability of entire economies. Understanding them is essential not only for investors but for anyone navigating an interconnected global economy. The currencies of Iraq and Vietnam, the dinar and the dong, have long attracted attention. But unfortunately, much of that attention has been driven by sensational claims and unrealistic promises of overnight fortunes. Online forums and social media groups often promote stories of imminent reevaluations that will supposedly transform small currency holdings into vast wealth. These narratives thrive because they appeal to emotion and the hope of quick, life-changing gains. The truth, however, is far more measured. Currency movements almost always occur as part of broader structural changes, gradual reforms to banking systems, fiscal discipline enforced by central banks, and long-term economic restructuring. Real appreciation or depreciation reflects years of policy decisions, investment flows, and international confidence, not sudden overnight announcements. For smart investors, the correct approach is therefore clear. First, rely only on verified data from official sources, such as central banks, government ministries, or credible financial institutions. Second, avoid making impulsive or reactionary decisions based on rumors, forum chatter, or speculative hype. Third, build a patient and disciplined investment strategy that can adapt as new, verifiable facts emerge. Those who chase get-rich-quick promises almost always face disappointment and financial loss. By contrast, those who focus on recognizing and aligning with long-term structural reforms stand to benefit steadily over time. The lesson is simple but powerful. Wealth creation in currency markets is not about gambling on whispers but about understanding, respecting, and responding to the real forces shaping national economies. As Iraq advances its ambitious program of financial and economic reforms, one issue growing increasingly important is equity and fairness in how benefits are distributed across society. While the Central Bank of Iraq has emphasized transparency and modernization, there remain concerns among citizens, observers, and analysts about the risk of preferential treatment being granted to certain groups. For example, if influential elites, politically connected investors, or select industries gain access to preferential exchange rates, tax breaks, or exclusive financial channels, then the broader population may feel sidelined. While such strategies could attract short-term foreign capital or stabilize strategic sectors, they also run the very real risk of undermining public trust in the reforms themselves. Ordinary Iraqi small business owners, wage earners, farmers, students, and rural families must see tangible benefits for these reforms to endure. Inclusive growth means more than stabilizing macroeconomic figures. It means expanding access to affordable banking, providing equal opportunity for loans and credit, and ensuring that cost reductions on imports actually reach consumers rather than being absorbed by middlemen. Transparency is not simply a moral principle but an economic necessity. Public trust forms the bedrock of any durable financial system. If reforms are perceived as serving only a narrow elite, resentment could fuel resistance, corruption, and instability. Undoing years of progress, on the other hand, reforms rooted in fairness can generate a virtuous cycle of confidence, participation, and stability that benefits not only the financial system but also Iraq's long-term national growth. When the dust settles, the experiences of both Iraq and Vietnam highlight the same truth. Real currency movements are not born from rumor or speculation but from sustained structural reforms, credible institutions, and integration into the global financial system. Iraq's dinar has strengthened not because of whispered promises, but because the central bank has initiated digitization, IMPR/OVD fiscal oversight, and aligned with international partners like the IMF. Vietnam's dong has weakened slightly, not as a sign of collapse, but as a strategic adjustment to maintain export competitiveness amid global inflation and supply chain disruptions. For investors, remittance senders, travelers, and businesses, the lesson is simple yet vital: stay disciplined, stay informed, and anchor decisions in fundamentals rather than hype. Currency markets, like all financial systems, reward patience, awareness, and sound strategy, not impulsive bets on speculative chatter. As part of this ongoing journey, we invite you, our readers and community members, to share your perspectives. Are you currently holding IQD or VND? If so, how are you approaching these developments? Are you planning to exchange, accumulate more, or simply wait for clearer signals? Your insights add valuable context to the broader conversation. Subscribe for verified updates, turn on alerts to remain ahead of key announcements, and join in the dialogue that shapes informed financial decision-making. Together, we will continue tracking official statements, measurable indicators, and global market responses to ensure your financial future is guided by clarity rather than confusion. Stay informed, stay prepared. Your financial future deserves nothing less.